Welcome to the What's Your Deal podcast, where we discuss business acquisitions, investments, management, and exit strategies. I'm your host, Matt Uhler. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of What's Your Deal. Today, we're joined with a good friend of mine named David Davis, who lives in Oklahoma City, and he's joining us virtually for today's episode. Part of what I find so fascinating about David, and I'm going to let him tell the story, but part of what I find so fascinating is that he came from a very extensive formal education, corporate life, and is now a business owner. And the business that he owns, he started from scratch. And so because I know David, I know some of where we're going, but I'm also real excited to see what comes from today's conversation. David, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Happy to be here, Matt.
Thank you. So would you mind giving us a little bit of a background of how you ended up where you are? Maybe just a glimpse at your corporate career and your education. I've often been known to say that David's one of the most educated people I know. Matter of fact, he is the most educated person I know. So it's a real honor to have you and for you to share that part of your life with us.
Well, it's still funny that you say that because I will tell everybody I've never been the best student. So the fact that I eventually is a miracle in and of itself. But yeah, I fell in love with the hotel business when I was in high school and really didn't think much about anything else. Never really knew until that point what I wanted to do. And my career was I was going to go to college, get an undergraduate degree in hospitality, hotel management, and then I was going to take on the hotel world. And I learned pretty fast that I wasn't prepared for college freedom and lost all my scholarships after my first semester because my GPA was so low.
Wow.
And that's when it was the best thing that ever happened to me because it made me go to work because I had to pay for college. And so I got my first job at a restaurant, realized the restaurant business was not my forte. And 6 months later, got my first hotel job, and I've never stopped working in the hotel industry since then. So happy to say I'm reaching 30 years this year. And yeah, I would say to sum up my career, it would be open. Again, I was not a great student all my life, was not a great student, but along the way, after I got my undergraduate degree and started my professional career, one of my boss's boss asked me if I was interested in an executive master's program. I said, sure, why not? You know, in addition to working 80 hours a week, I'll throw in a master's degree. And thankfully, my parents instilled into me some ambition and work ethic and worked at that. And then I was never going to pursue graduate work. And then, you know, just being open to network people and other opportunities, fell into an academic career where I became a professor, or actually an instructor. Then I got my PhD, became a professor, all in the hospitality space. And that's where I really learned. I learned the management side of the business in my first decade. And then the second decade was about learning the educational experience, and really thought I would be in academia forever. I was working for a large publicly traded company in my management career. Then I went to work for a large academic institution, a land-grant university here in Oklahoma, and did that for about 12 years and realized that my future where I thought it was going to be in academia wasn't. And so that led me into, I went to work for a management company in Oklahoma City. I was leading that company, and then through a series of events through COVID, that one had to dissolve, and I took my client base within that company and started my own businesses. So that's the quick narrative of how I got here.
Well, that's great. Yeah. And it's interesting. Part of the reason I find your academic education so interesting is because I don't have any. I started working right out of high school. And so it's a whole world along with corporate life, because I'd never worked for a corporation either, that is so intriguing to me and I'm so fascinated to learn by. And so your process through academics and then into the working world is fascinating. So what is it that you said you thought you would probably be in academia for your career? So what happened? What shifted? What switched? Because deciding to start one business is one thing. Deciding to start three pretty much at once is another. So can you help us understand how you made that transition?
Yeah, it was really, I don't want to say it was a dark moment, but certainly the stars fell out of the sky for me once I got my PhD. Being a person that I was always looking for that next challenge, I had become a very good instructor. So I was good at the teaching part of the professorate. And so I went into administration. I became the assistant director of the school. And I like to say that's where I realized that higher education, in my opinion, is dying a very slow death because everything moves slowly in higher education.
Wow.
And what I mean by that personally is I approached the academic side from the results of the majority of students are undergraduate students going out into a workforce. What kind of experience and training do they need? So like my dissertation and a lot of my research was around human motivation and a working environment, working collaboratively across interdisciplinary departments, that sort of thing. And when I started to try to infuse that into curriculum, I realized some of my ideas were a threat to what I call the sacred cows of higher education, the tenure track and some of those steeped processes and things that just don't want to change. Even when the industry and world is screaming for change in higher education, it's not, for me, it wasn't happening. And I could have spent my career in that world swimming upstream against sacred cows and sharks. And I just didn't want to. I wanted to have influence in another way. And so that's why I went into the private sector in 2018. But that was it. I still love teaching. I love my students. Many of my former students work for me in my companies because I've been able to have a network of thousands of students over 12 years, and I've been able to cherry pick the best of the best to come to work for me.
That's great. So what was the first business that you dove into, and how did that happen? Were there bank loans involved? How did that play out?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was very much an organic thing. It's funny, I just had a demo for that company with a prospective client today where I got to tell this story, so it's pretty fresh on my mind. But I didn't know it, but back in 2018, when I took on this management company, one of the things most people don't realize about the hotel business is it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. There's a whole world that goes on behind the curtain people don't even realize. And one of those is a process called revenue management. That is the art and science of analyzing data like booking windows, price sensitivity, and determining what is the right price to put on a hotel room for any given night. That was my first job out of college 25 years ago, where I really started. And back then it was very different. I was a revenue manager for a single hotel. Now I have a revenue management company that we are one company and have multiple clients across the country. So basically, when I took on that management company, they were all using brand revenue management. So that was hiring Marriott, Hilton, IHG to do the revenue management. Well, I had been out of the industry and in academia for a while, so I was optimistic that that was going to be great. And what I learned within 6 months is that I can do it better myself. And so we basically eliminated all the brand services. I hired one of my former students to be our director of revenue management. And then I looked at our internal sales force and I said, we have too much salary. We don't have good enough results. And I hired another former student to come in and be my corporate director of sales. And the three of us basically changed the internal structure of the sales and revenue management process for that hotel management company. Again, these are jobs that most people don't realize are actually happening to help hotels. And we didn't have a clue, but we were building the foundation of the first company we would start. Because what we developed over those 2 years before COVID was what I would say are the best demonstrated practices in those two disciplines of our business, sales and revenue management. And so through COVID, the family that owned the hotels we were managing, they had to sell off assets through COVID. And so every time they would sell an asset, we would have one less management contract. And so we then realized, we've got something pretty special in our sales and revenue management processes. And in April 2021, we went out and sold our first third-party client. And that's when it really started. So it was out of survival. It was ingenuity. I've learned there's 4 things you need to start a business: opportunity, time, expertise, and money. I had these 3 in spades thanks to my education and background. I had opportunity, time, and expertise, and then I needed money. So to your question, the first business was called Fuse Topline Solutions. We named it Fused because we're really the industry's only integrated sales and revenue management company.
Okay.
We have competitors that do only sales, and we have competitors that do only revenue management. We do both, and we do them both very well. Now, we do have some clients that hire us only to do sales, and we work with brand revenue management or internal revenue management, but we train our sales specialists on revenue management. So with us, you're getting a trained person. Here's why I knew I had a good business idea. During COVID, when we were worried about who are we going to have to lay off, I actually interviewed my now competitors thinking, well, if I have to lay off my talented staff, I've got to replace that process with somebody. And when I interviewed these competitors and realized they're not flexible, they're not dynamic, they don't focus on profitable revenue generation, they're not doing these fundamental things that I think that they should be doing, I think I have a business opportunity. And we thought it was going to be what saved that company. We learned a year later from April 21, we had one client to April 22, we had 19 clients at that point.
Wow.
The management company had to dissolve. And me and my employees basically said, we don't want to stop working together. We can take these 19 clients and make our own company. And we became the co-founders of Fuse Topline Solutions.
Okay.
There was a debt. I bought all the contracts from that previous company, which was dissolving for next to nothing. The owner of that company, the CEO, is a friend of mine. He let me buy the technology we needed from him because he was dissolving the company. He needed to get it off anyway. And so really we started it up with nothing, and we didn't start payroll for 90 days. As clients paid us, I would send there was three of us, I would send money and we would try to make ends meet as best we could until we got it off the ground.
Okay.
So,
okay. So that company is still, it sounds like it kind of morphed because of the dynamic with the company that you started working with. And so now became its own entity, and that company's still in operation. And how much time do you spend in that now?
yeah, great question. I would say I spend probably 20 to 25% of my week in that company.
Okay.
It is thriving. It's doing great. It's a heavy service based business, right? So there's not a lot of need for equipment or anything like that. We have employees in 6 different states across the country. We've grown to now over 55 service lines coast to coast. And, the industry still doesn't really know we exist.
Mm-hmm.
So we've all grown from word of mouth, referrals from clients, and doing good work. And so really excited for the future for that company. But it's certainly thriving. I've got a great core group of leaders that run the day to day, and then I get to work on the business.
Okay, great. And you have another one that's developed or spun off from your activity. So share with us what that business does and how that's gone, because startups can be tricky.
Woo, you can say that again. So that one was similar in that management company, we had several clients that were paying for my consulting services. And these clients were in pre-development of a new hotel. So they had a piece of land and they were wanting to develop a hotel. They needed a hotel consultant to give them guidance as they grew.
Okay.
Presumably that company would have eventually been the hotel management company. So the second business I created, which was a month after we created the first one, was a hotel management consulting business. I took those 4 clients I had that were paying a monthly, basically retainer of my time, and that became the impetus for what is now Boundless Hospitality, which is our hotel management consulting company. I did take on an early partner with that one before we needed money, and he was a developer, and he had about 5 clients that he was doing similar work with, and we combined.
Okay.
Unfortunately, he passed away later that year, and I was left without a developing arm. I had already started pursuing my investor because I needed that 4th thing of starting a business, and I needed to be able to hire people and buy things, and I didn't have the money sitting around to do that. And so I was already starting to negotiate with that investor when he passed away, my original partner. And then the unfortunate part for that business is all of our contracts were pre-construction, pre-development. So we're talking in architecture, interior design, that sort of thing. And then in 2023, interest rates went like this and construction prices went like this, and pretty much ground up hotel development stopped. And so I had to quickly, after I raised the money through my investor to start that company, I had to pivot, and I had to say, well, these clients are all stalling their projects. They're not going to continue them. I had to lay people off, and that's when we got really creative. And that's when we found that we could go into the commercial laundry business, which is the 3rd business I started. I never set to go into commercial laundry, but here I am running commercial laundry now because we found the opportunity by being flexible, curious, and kind of not very risk averse.
Interesting choice of words too, because I know you, I wouldn't characterize you as not risk adverse, but there was a reason for doing that, right? I mean, for most people, starting one business is a lot, or even buying one business at one time. Now you've got 3. So what was the impetus with the commercial laundry business, and why commercial laundry?
Yeah, great question. It still is that same thing out of survival. It's recognizing that, I pursued business because I wanted freedom. I'll be honest with you. That's what I've learned along the way is that I'm in pursuit of freedom. Now, in chasing freedom, I've taken on responsibility, which is not always a very freeing concept. However, what laundry means to the whole thing is a new almost insulated entity from the operating dynamic. And both my Fuse Topline Solutions and Laundry, I believe, are businesses that are going to actually improve in a recession or a difficult economic time in our industry, not starve. Or whereas the hotel management side, it becomes a lot more difficult when times are tough.
Okay.
But a lot of people are looking for cost efficiency measures, and we are a cost efficient measure because you can hire a professional director of sales level educated person for a fraction of the cost of a full-time employee. You can outsource your laundry for a lot less than what it costs for you to do it in-house. And so we're going to be solutions that I think thrive through economic uncertainty, which we've always had in our industry. I've been in for really 4 different recession cycles in my career now. And so we all know that they're going to happen. And so I think laundry is somewhat protection. It is a very equipment heavy, capital intense business, which I did not have the stomach for, but I found the stomach for it and I'm figuring it out. And it's a very good scalable business. And in my market in Oklahoma, what I'm trying to do hasn't been done before,
Okay.
which is, as I've heard you say on your show, and I've heard other people say, is you've got to find opportunities to take something. If it works in St. Louis or if it works in Kansas City, there's no reason it can't work in Oklahoma City just because nobody's done it before. And people have done commercial laundry before, but not like what I'm trying to do.
Okay. So what have you learned through this process? I mean, it sounds like the first one, if I heard you correctly, started in 18 and here we are in 2025. That's a lot of startup and a lot of moving parts and trying to decide what works and what doesn't work. So what have you learned? What are you finding that's that you might be able to share with our audience that would be valuable from your process?
Yeah, I would say I think the difference between 2018 and 2022, because I wouldn't say I really started my entrepreneur journey until 2022.
Okay.
The foundation was set back in 2018, but we were in a company. I was a W-2 employee.
I see.
I was leading the operations of that company. So we were building the framework of that first company, but not the mindset it took to take it to where it's at. Honestly, it took me meeting people like you and learning from people that are very smart in the business world to help me figure out certain things about that. I grew up, my parents were, I would say, lower middle class. Mom was always a W-2 worker. My dad was always a self-employed kind of entrepreneur type person. One of his businesses went bankrupt when I was 9. And so I learned I would say the best way possible by being enmeshed in it growing up, what small business was like. And it's not easy. I didn't know at the time that I would eventually run small businesses, but I did learn a lot from that experience growing up as well. But yeah, I would say what I would learn to help people is there's a lot of awesome improvements in technology, education that we have today. But one of the things that's interesting I'm learning in business, some of the old time tested things from generations past still work very well. Face-to-face selling still works very well. One of the things my dad taught me when I was a kid was never have a conversation with somebody about price unless it's face-to-face. You don't do it over the phone because money is an emotional transaction. So when you're negotiating with people, you don't do it over email. You don't do it over the phone. You could do it web, but you need to be face-to-face with people because dealing with money in a transaction is emotional and you should honor that. And so negotiating price, whatever it is, do it in person if you can. What I've learned since 2022 is if you can buy an existing business, do it. And I'm not just, shining a light on your model, but your model is a good one because for all the reasons you talk about, startup is really hard. I didn't say I'm going to go start a business. Like I want to do a startup because I think I can. I was looking at what do I have? And our first business already had fuel in the tank. So it was a fairly easy startup in that regard. It's not been easy since because it's just now scratching a point of stability. 3 years later.
Hmm.
But it is coming into its own. We've gotten better at pricing. I would say one of the things, and this is going to be hard because I hope that people in my circle listen to this. There's a reason people say things like, be careful about getting in business with friends.
Hmm.
The reason people say things about pay attention to the fine print and all those types of things, because they really matter in business. And the last thing that comes to mind, I would say, is don't be afraid to ask questions. Even if you're as old as I am and you don't know something yet, that's a good thing because now you have an opportunity. When I started negotiating with my investor, who's a very wise, seasoned business person, he was using terms that I was having to Google after every meeting, like, what does this mean? I don't even know how to respond to his question.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am, as you said, probably overeducated, which I'm not a very bright person. So it's not like I've got, all these academic accolades worth anything. But what I do have is the ability to be curious and say, if I don't know, I'm going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason I can't learn something. People in academia call that a growth mindset. I've always had that kind of idea that I can figure something out. I can work hard and do the best I can. And so, yeah, don't be afraid to look stuff up and ask questions.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned four things, and one of the things that I think is true about startup is you don't know, or I should say, it's hard to know exactly how much of each of those four you need. How much money, how much time. I mean, that's part of the challenge. And you've shared with me that that's been part of your challenge as you've progressed as well.
I tell you, if I could be an excellent pro forma writer. I've written so many podcasts and pro formas, and my investor gave me a hard time the other day because he's like, I've heard you say this word viable before. We're still waiting on viable. Because here's what's crazy about getting the honor of speaking to somebody like you is my startups aren't even producing dividends yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still very much in that startup mode. I think my first business has reached a mature startup where we're stable now, but the others are still in startup mode. And that's a hard place to be in for very long because you don't know how much money you need. You can always look back and say, oh, I should have spent this money differently, whatever. But yeah, you got to deal with what's in front of you. And that's where I'm at.
Well, I appreciate that. I also appreciate the humility of what you're sharing, because it's tough to share real life with people, but I would like to think that that's a lot of what my audience wants to hear is what's the real life about this stuff. And there's so much sugarcoating that's going on with social media in general, but certainly in speaking to my industry, there's a lot of people out there that make it sound easy and that it's no big deal. And it's something I think that's absolutely worth doing, buying a business and acquiring a business. But it does require some education and some thought and pace and contemplation. It's not something that should just be jumped into. And it's, that gets overlooked. So your authentic, real approach is really refreshing, and just being willing to share so other people might learn. So if you had to do it all over again, I mean, where you are right now, how much of your time are you spending on the 3 different businesses? And if you had to do it all over again, what would you do different based on what you know now?
Yeah. Well, clearly, I would go back to that initial investment money and spend it differently. But at the time, I thought I was making good decisions. So I really wouldn't even spend too much time given that energy of, I wish I'd done this. I would say probably one of the best things I could have done is gotten my wife's input earlier.
Interesting.
My wife is she is a risk averse person. She is very also intuitive. And I had the realization probably, I think it was around 4 months after I started the laundry business, where I woke up one morning. I don't remember what caused it. And I thought, you know what? I have never once sat down and asked my wife what she thinks about this or anything. I just literally said, well, this opportunity, this door's opening, I'm going to go through it. We're going to sign personal guarantees on this. And she, was loyal to me and did it. And here we are. And so when I acknowledged this to her, she dropped some of the most amazing insight that I could have ever had. And so when you do have a partner in life, in marriage, or a good business partner, whatever, seek counsel. Go ask questions and tell people what you're doing or what you plan to do, and tell them to shoot holes in your bucket. Say, tell me where I'm weak, because man, you can't do this on an island. You don't run a business in a vacuum, and you've got to really, really lean into people that are with you, and there's not necessarily a gain for them. I think that's the softest way I could say it, is listen to the people that don't have anything to gain or lose from your success.
That's great.
Because if they're taking the time to share it with you, and they're running along beside you for whatever reason, a mentor, a friend, a wife, a husband, listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to agree with them, but listen to them.
Well, it's great input. And part of the reason I chuckle when you talk about asking your wife for her input, of course, in a partnership, especially where you're signing personal guarantees and it becomes a financial commitment for both spouses, that's super important. And part of my chuckling is thinking through how many of the people I know in business who don't want to ask their wife because they don't want the answer or vice versa. And I think it's a real factor. Now, when most people buy businesses, it's a team sport. You can't go very far without getting familial support. But in some of what you did, you could. So do you think that she wanted to provide feedback? Because I also know some spouses where they just say, listen, you handle that, you've handled it well. I'm not interested. I'd leave it up to you, and I trust you. Is that the dynamic between you and your wife, or did literally you just kind of full speed ahead and then looked back and realized she was standing there?
Yeah, no, it was not full on trust. I would say loyalty, yes, which is a great, admirable quality in a partner, but she had trust issues. And so when I brought this up to her, I had actually made a decision to hire a new plant manager for the laundry business, and which was going to cause me to have to separate with an operating partner. Mm-hmm. And so I asked her, I said, now that I've acknowledged this to you, how would you like to be involved in the business? Because whether we intended it or not, we now have a family business. And she said, well, I'd like to get involved in the hiring of the plant manager because, and she goes off and lists like 5 notable mishires of my past, which I've literally employed hundreds of people in my career. I've hit some home runs, but yeah, I've had some mishires. We all have. And she lists this person, this person, this person, that she says, I know you wish you hadn't hired them after the fact. I think I can give some insight into the hiring process. So that's what I did. My employees and I, we went through the early kind of proofing stages of people. We had 4 phases of interviews, and she came in the final interviews of the 4 candidates, and she gave her input. And we hired a great plant manager because of that. And he's doing a great job, doing exactly what we need him to do.
Well, that's excellent. And do you think, how does it feel at home now compared to before with her even just having that involvement? Has it changed? Does it feel more like a team sport, or what's the dynamic change just with that simple example you shared?
Yeah, it certainly made asking questions on both of our parts more encouraged and confident. She asked me questions, and I can ask her input and questions. I wouldn't say she's gotten overly involved since then. She certainly spent some days at the plant doing laundry work. We have 4 boys. All of them have been at the plant working in a variety of ways and different things. So she spent some time there, but she's not that involved at this time. That was kind of her one big involvement, was helping hire the plant manager. But she also homeschools and runs our house, and she has a busy life. So it's not like I can expect a lot from her in the business besides loyalty, asking questions, and she proofreads a lot of stuff for me because she's great with grammar and proofreading, and she does some of that.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I know that my wife, sometimes I feel like I'm bothering her by sharing some of the dynamics that go on in my business world during the day. However, when I do, it does bring us closer together. She has a better understanding of what I'm up to and what I'm struggling with or what I'm celebrating and whatever the case may be. And it does bring us together in that way. I had a client many, many years ago who, very established businessman, sophisticated, and been around the block. And he said, my wife and I, we made an agreement a long time ago that because of my business acumen and my education, that when it comes to any significant business decision, that I make the final decision. And she has no issue with that. She trusts that when I need to make that decision, I make that decision, and that is the gospel. We're not going back on it. And he says, you know, what's fascinating is in 25 years, we've never had one significant decision that I've had to make. So it's a interesting dynamic, this dance between husbands and wives in business.
Yep.
So what's next for you? When you look at the next 12 months, you've already shared, you've got these businesses that are on the brink of, we'll say, profitability, and you're still working your way through it. What do you want to see in the next 12 months? And what do you think is achievable with these startups?
Yes, that's a great question. In 12 months, all three startups will be profitable. I will have returned and caught up on dividend payments to my investor, and we will be starting to put money in what I call operating reserve funds and establishing where the comfortable numbers are before we start buying back shares. And so that's really what the focus will be on. Along with that comes a lot of milestones that need to be hit. I would say right now in the laundry business, we're at probably 40% of the capacity we need to be at. Now, with what we're doing, it only takes one good size hotel client to put us to 60 and 90% capacity, right? It doesn't take much. So we're very much starting as a small commercial laundry business that will bloom. I would say for that business in 12 months, I want to be opening another location in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so therefore that's another round of capital and setting up learning what we learned in the first laundry plant and applying it to the second laundry plant. But that allows us, and that's a counter model to current commercial laundry where they build a giant 100,000 square foot facility and then they reach far places. That creates a lot of issues. Now, we may do some of that further out, but right now I want to focus on the two metros in Oklahoma, bring this service that hadn't existed before to hotels, and really revolutionize that part of the business. One of the things I didn't say about my businesses that's important is all three of my businesses, we're designed to make life better for owners, team members, and guests of hotels. They all approach that in different ways. So when you think about business, it's important to have an anchor, a vision, some type of tenet that you hold on to that is your marker. And I can go into a long dissertation about why that's important, including Wall Street and publicly traded companies and where we're at as an industry. But the focus is owners, team members, and guests. And so what can I do to make life better for all three of those populations? That's what we're doing.
Okay. So one of the things that jumps out at me is the opening a second location or another location. I can imagine some people, having been through some of what you've gone through with the startup challenges, just being like, okay, I'm ready for a break. I'm just going to catch my breath here, enjoy the fruits of my labor. But that's not what I heard you say. And so what is that about? Is that just about ambition? Is that about scale? What's the motivation behind another location pretty much as soon as you can, it sounds like?
Yeah, so it is not about ambition. Younger David was blindly ambitious, and that's not always a healthy thing. It's really about delivering on those three populations I talked about: owners, team members, and guests. Right now, a majority of my clients are in Tulsa. I send a truck every day to Tulsa. It's going to be difficult certain times of the year to provide the best service I can. I want to be close to my customer base, and there's enough. If you curate what I would call, for lack of a better term, a boutique commercial laundry business, it doesn't have to be gigantic. In fact, the equipment I go out and get is what hotels would have themselves, right? I'm not buying large commercial tunnel washers and things like that. And so we're providing a curated niche part of the business, an answer to a challenge they have, which is in-house laundry operations. So it's about scale, yes. It's about protection of the whole, and diversifying two locations allows you to serve more, to scale, learn, grow. I even want to have a third location within a few years down in South Oklahoma that could even reach the North Texas market, which is gigantic. And so there's a lot of, I'm in this for the long haul. I told my partner and investor that, he's worried sometimes about, well, when you're when are you going to do distributions because of, getting caught up on my dividends, whatever. It's like, I'm getting a salary from this. I'm able to pay myself. I'm not looking for distributions anytime soon. I'm looking to build really strong businesses that serve me, my base, my employees, and these three populations well. And I think I can do that better with 2 locations, one in each metro, that are smaller facilities that can reach the audience they need to reach, and then go from there. I think it'll be a stronger business. Trying to squeeze more out of one plant, I think, is a vulnerability.
Okay. That's an interesting word. And so what is your relationship like with your investor? I mean, he's not involved in the day-to-day. He is a partner, but it sounds like he's also an investor. And the distinction there, correct me if I'm wrong, but a partner has equity and an investor may be anticipating some form of repayment that's guaranteed or consistent. So how is that relationship? And you don't need to disclose anything you don't feel comfortable with, but how is that relationship defined and how is it working?
It's working great. He is an amazing investor. I'll tell the quick story how I got there because I think it's worth your audience understanding. When I first came up with the business ideas and realized I needed money, my first approach was I want to have the control, so I went after banks.
Okay.
I had so many banking conversations. They looked at my Vita, my resume, my business plan. Like, David, your resume's great. Your business plan's amazing. Your personal financial statement is okay, but it's not what it should be for us to back this. So we're a no. And what I learned pretty quickly is banks don't like to loan you money until you don't need their money anymore. They like a safe bet, right? They like they don't like risk. Well, that's when I got onto investors, and I had a meeting with a billionaire in Dallas who was, he could have given me what I was asking for out of his right front pocket. He has so much money. And he told me, he's like, David, I might choose to invest in your company, but I would rather you go spend the next 30 days finding a strategic investor because I'm not a strategic investor. I'm just a business person with money. And what that means is you find somebody that is looking for what you have besides dividends or whatever. And that's what I found in my investor. He's developing a wide swath of land in South Oklahoma with hotels on it. And I represent an entity that can advise him and be a part of his other businesses, whether I come along or not. And so I found that strategic investor. We have a good relationship. I office in one of his office buildings right now. We meet regularly. Every time I meet with him, it's an educational experience. I feel like I get another master's degree in business, and he teaches me things. He holds me accountable, and he expects financials to be in line and turned in and those sorts of things. But it's been a great partnership. But one of the things I had to Google in my negotiations with him was he was saying, I just want a preferred coupon. I'm like, coupons were something I cut out when I was a kid when my mom would go into the grocery store, right? So I was like, what does this preferred coupon mean? So what it means is he's a preferred shareholder, right? So it puts him in first position to get his dividends. I'm the only common shareholder of the company. So I own the common shares. He has preferred shares. I'm the only managing partner, so he's not involved in the day-to-day. I make all the decisions and have the authority, but he does, from a percentage standpoint, he owns more than half the company. That's the reality. And so that's his and I's arrangement. That's more than he's comfortable owning. That's more than I'm comfortable owning, which is why I need to be successful. I get to be successful and buy back shares from him. And that's where the focus is. That's what he wants. That's what I want. And that's what we're working towards. And so, yeah, been a great partnership, but the key is that strategic investor and realizing that it's a different pitch from banks to investors. And that's a good thing. We do banks too. I've had loans now. He helped me get loans to start the laundry business, but you need a mix. But what I needed in the beginning was investor. And I burned a lot of calories for about 90 days chasing banks. That was a good lesson.
Yeah. You could spend a lifetime doing that, couldn't you?
Yeah.
So let me ask you 2 more questions. The first question is that so many business people struggle with rhythm in their life and balance in their life. And what I mean by that is filling their personal cup so that they have something to give back, working in their business, and then also family life. And I know because we've talked in the past that you've had some long days at the laundry facility doing what needed to be done, and challenges with some clients and the way things are being processed, and you were the guy to solve that problem. It takes time. And the only thing that we all have the same amount of is time in this life. So can you share with us how you've worked to manage balance and a large family that need your attention, along with businesses that need your attention?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of prayer, a lot of intentionality, a lot of being honest and vulnerable with your spouse and partner, and even your kids. To an extent, there's things that kids won't understand. Being open to involving them. I love when my family comes to the laundry business. It is quality time in a weird way, right?
Mm-hmm.
My 5-year-old's driven his little dump truck around the warehouse and carried file boxes and emptied first aid kits and stuff and made messes. But anyway, it's it's an openness to realizing that it's not just me on the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Family's on the journey too. And I think people that are just going into business because they want to or they're chasing something, you need to have a purpose and a vision, and you need to have some accountability to that. And it can't just be, oh, I wrote it down or it's on a sticky on my mirror. You got to tell somebody about it. You got to have a community you check in with that holds you accountable. It could be your partners, your coworkers, or whatever. It could be an outside group, but you got to have groundedness, and you do that through knowing why you're doing what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing. And if you're doing something and you don't know why you're doing it, just stop. Take a minute, go walk in nature. I like to say take your shoes off and go barefoot, and get in touch with why it is you are here, you have the opportunities you have, and what is it, why is this in front of you right now? It may be there just as a shiny object to say, oh, that's cool, and dismiss it, to challenge you to be disciplined, or it might be an opportunity. And if you don't know why you're doing something, you need to figure that out, because that will help give you clarity. And then the other thing is, when you do go home with the intention of being home. Don't go home. And I'm as guilty as anybody about, we are always accessible via email and Voxers and all kinds of stuff. But you got to have some intentionality. And so I'm saying this to myself when I watch this later too. Go home and sit on your kid's bed and check in.
Mm-hmm.
Go take a walk. My family talks way better when we're walking than we do sitting around or driving, either one. So take some time to do those things very regularly.
Well, those are great gems. I appreciate that. And one thing I've learned in my own life is that at least for me, there's no shortage of work. I will always create more. There's lots of things I love to do, but without that clear purpose or understanding why I'm doing what I'm doing, I might just be wasting time and compromising my family and my quality of life in the process. So the why is very important. So the last question I have for you, and it's one that touches a special spot in my heart because A, it means a lot to me, but B, the responses I get from people move me sometimes. And the question is, in life, most of us have had somebody who's given us a hand up or saw something in us that we might not have seen in ourselves that helped us to either get past the tough time or try to reach for something that was beyond what we thought was capable. So I'm curious, in your life and especially in your business life, since you've been on this path, who in your world saw something in you or gave you a hand up to help you get to where you are today and on the path to, having several businesses that are successful and supporting you and your family and your employees and everybody well?
Yeah, there could be a book with a chapter for each person. There's been so many. I would certainly start with my parents. I had great parents that, you know, modeled the same dysfunction all families do, but they also modeled a lot of really good function and values that serve me well to this day. Watching my parents struggle through business, and my dad was the operations service side of his businesses. My mom was the financial accounting side, and I have many memories of tax season. Mom would take over the big dining room table because she's doing taxes for the farm, for dad's business, for them personally, and all kinds of stuff. And we didn't have automation back then. It was all on paper. And so it was, I saw that, and I saw really good work ethic. I saw humility. I saw fundamentals of how to do business. And I didn't even realize it at the time. It wasn't like I was taking notes, but I was living it with my parents, hardworking people, committed to those things. I would say others that gave me a hand up and gave me encouragement a lot in college, some professors that saw in me that really didn't let me put up. I was working through college by working overnight in hotels. And I had one professor in particular that I worked Thursday night. I got off at 7 a.m. I had his class at 8 a.m. and I would fall asleep sometimes in class because I was up all night. And he would never let me get by with it. And he actually became my boss later when I was in academia. He was director of our school. He gave me, so that's a good full circle moment.
Yeah.
In business, I've had bosses that gave me jobs. Bob Fugazi's one that comes to mind. He hired me as a general manager of a hotel before I was ready. He let me be a revenue manager before I even knew what that was back in the day, but he saw something in me that gave me a leg up and really gave me confidence to continue to strive for more learning opportunity and whatnot. The CEO of the company that I went to work for, Jason Tabler, he certainly gave me an education in business and a leg up in allowing me to buy contracts and equipment from him to start that first business very reasonably, next to nothing. And he really encouraged me. And he even said, I helped him start a trucking business through COVID, and he went on to do that. And he said, if you need anything, I'm here. And I thought, man, I'm going to be calling him every day. And what I realized was I really do have a lot more that I can contribute to this than I realized. And so he really gave me that encouragement. And then I would say meeting people like you and learning from you about, there's a whole world in business acquisition and small business that I've not paid attention to. And it's allowed me to open my mind to what truly attracted me to the hotel business 30 years ago. And that was a large industry made up of small business operators. Now, our industry's changed. We've gone to Wall Street, but I kind of, with meeting you and following your journey with Amped, I'm seeing now full circle what attracted me to the hotel business originally. And so I'm very humbled to be here in your sphere. And I think what you and your team are doing is just amazing and perfect timing, because the young people of today need to understand that they can do what you're talking about. And there is information at their fingertips and in their ears that gives them what they need to go forward and to do things. And it does not have to be large, grandiose, scaled, private equity level stuff. Find a level of contentment in business and just go live that. Be your own boss and enjoy that.
Well, I appreciate that. There's lots of insights there. And I think what shines through is just team. It's so easy to look at an individual and see success, but behind every individual that I've seen, there's a team or lots of people over the years that have contributed. So thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your story and some vulnerability about the path you're on and some of the things that you're in the middle of. And I'll be curious to I think we should have another episode once you open your second location, and we can talk through that process and discuss some of the things that you learned there. So thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode with David Davis, and as always, that you were able to find gems in that conversation that you can use to complement and accelerate your business path and your life, and especially your connection with the people around you that you care about, that benefit from what you're doing every day. Until next time. And that's a wrap on today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and got some valuable insights into the world of buying and selling businesses. Want to be a guest on our show? If you have a deal that you'd like to discuss with us or a business story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email using the contact information below in the episode notes, and let's make this happen. Never miss an episode. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you found today's episode helpful, please leave us a review. It helps more people like you find the show.